And on this Sabbath, since we were celebrating men for the month of June, we decided to entitle the theme, Fathers Going Further. And on this Sabbath, we're going to have a courageous conversation about fatherhood. For most of us who have had an active father in our lives, and for some of us who have not had an active father in our lives physically, that we're going to have this conversation. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce our gifted, our blessed man of God who has stepped into this role, none other than the man himself, McDonald Gene. So would you give him a hearty amen as he comes to the stage? This is my brother from another mother. So I thank God for him, and he's our ministry leader, and thank God for him because he orchestrated and put together this day. We were in cahoots together, and so we thank God for the work that he's doing and for what God will continue to do for him. And so please pray for him as he's really doing the work that God has called him to do. And so I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to take over from here.
I was born a Seventh-day Adventist, right? And my father was the first elder, he was the head deacon. I mean, my mom served in the church for as long as I can remember. We basically were the ones that opened the church up and shut it down. We were at every Wednesday prayer night meeting, we were every Friday rehearsal, my mom sang in the choir, anything that was going on. We were at nursing homes, we were at hospitals. It was the entire family in a family cargo van everywhere that had to do with church, right? So I had a pretty good foundation of Christianity and being in the church and being active. But for as long as I can remember, I was always very strategic in a way that I could be seen but be out of reach. And what I mean by that is, I did everything that I could in order to avoid being selected to do anything in the church. So I would find the farthest corner closest to the door. So when service is over, if there was like an announcement that was made, so hey, if we need volunteers to do this or do that, I could just jet to the car and be out of sight, right? And so for whatever reason, I was a bit lackadaisical that Sabbath when he cornered me and I didn't make my move. and so here I am. When I took on this position, I took it under one condition, that it wouldn't be your traditional men's ministry department. And what I mean by that is, I think it's great to have prayer lines and do visiting ministries and all those things, but for as long as I can remember, and the worst part is, it's associated with the church. For as long as I can remember, the men that I've encountered have always put on this mask and this face of spirituality and having it all together and being providers for their family and working men and spiritual men and so forth. But I knew about the things that I struggled with as a man. And I was like, am I the only one? Am I the only one going through these things that are, things that I'm afraid to share with folks? Like, am I the only one that's going through these things? And so I said to myself, I'm gonna do this a little different. I'm not gonna stray too far away from, the traditional ways, but I'm gonna try to approach this from a perspective where we can actually help men and meet men where they are. And that's going to require shattering comfort zones, getting people out of the daily, hey, how you doing, brother? Good. All right. See you next Sabbath. Those service conversations we have. Hey, how's your week? Good. Great. All right. See you next Sabbath. What would happen if we actually stopped, pulled a brother to the side, and actually really dug deep and asked really and truly, man, tell me what's going on with you. What's really, really going on with you? I mean, I see you every Sabbath and we pass each other by, but what's really going on with you? And what if we were honest? Would it be a fly-by conversation? Would we just kind of go about our way and that be it? If we were really, really honest. And so, my guests are people that you know. They've been a part of the fabric of this church for as long as, I guess, I've been here. And I've been here for about 4 or 5 years, but I'm sure they've been here much longer. And I've just always just admired this family, the entire family, from afar as I watch. I watch people a lot, and I pay attention to them. And I've always just admired what I've seen as far as the family unit. And so when we were thinking about putting this conversation together, I was actually on the way to the men's summit down in Athens, and I got a text message from Pastor Jamie, and he sent me a link. And the link was to the documentary we're going to watch this evening. And my reckless self, as I'm doing 70 on the highway, I'm trying to watch this YouTube video, and I'm swerving, and it got so bad I just pulled over into a parking lot and actually watched it, and I was floored. And I said, we need to have this conversation here, now, in the presence of everyone, and just be vulnerable and just have this conversation and talk about these things, because we're raising another generation that's going to go back into this world that we expect great things from, but we aren't really preparing them. We tell them that they should pray, and they should attend church, and they should, be obedient to their parents, and then we leave it at that. Is that really enough? It wasn't enough for me, I can tell you that much. So, I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but so I want to introduce to you guys, without further ado, the McNorton men, Wesley, Carrie, and Jonathan. And we're going to have a conversation. I didn't give them my questions because I didn't want to have shock factor, but I really wanted to get completely, truly vulnerable answers. You coming up too? A woman's perspective. All right now.
That's so wrong.
So, I didn't give them my questions because I really wanted them to be as transparent as possible, and they promised me that they would be. And my hope today at the end of this conversation is that we become a bit more free in sharing with each other. There are a lot of broken people amongst us, and we carry these fake facades just to get by. And I really want to, especially the men, I really want you guys to use this day as a catapult to really kind of change the way that we interact with one another. Because it's not just enough to just go about our day as if everything's great when we know that we're dying inside. So, before I start, pray with me. Father in heaven, I am unworthy to even stand here. I don't really have the words or the questions to ask to really kind of get to the root cause of the things that we face that we need to address in order to get closer to you. I pray that you give us all vulnerability, openness, and a willingness to share, so that we all may be touched in a way that we are willing to evolve and change for the embetterment for your glory. I ask you for these things in Jesus' name we pray, amen. What's going on, fellas? Don't they look sharp? I said I wear jerseys and they came up here in suits. My goodness. So, I just have a few questions and you guys can answer in the way that you understand the question. But before we get started, I want to read something. read an article in the Washington Post that caught my attention. It says, what does it really mean to be a man? That depends on whom you ask, but the stereotypes go something like this. A real man is stoic and unemotional. A real man is physically strong, a protector. A real man doesn't show weakness or ask for help or show vulnerability. Research shows that these traditional expectations of masculinity have harmful consequences. Men are far less likely than women to seek mental health treatment. And data indicates that men commit a huge majority of violent crimes reported in the U.S. each year. I wonder why. According to Dr. Wisdom Powell, an associate professor of psychiatry at UConn, who has studied the intersection of masculinity and health, the correlation between these statistics is simple. If you think about the common narrative around men and boys that teaches them that boys don't cry, or that they should walk it off, take it like a man under any circumstance, you could imagine the habitual practices of not telling anyone your pain or your worries could have significant implications. Dr. Powell said there are downstream consequences of not really having a healthy outlet to dispense negative emotion. If you're bottled up all the time, it's like a whack-a-mole. You guys remember whack-a-mole, the toy? You hit it and it pops back up. It will pop up behaviorally in another way. That's why there's a growing movement of men who are rejecting today's society's rigid definition of masculinity and redefining what it means to be a man. I chose this family because you obviously have a father. You also have another father, but a younger version of a father. And we have a man that's not yet a father. So, first question for you guys, and you guys can answer this in any order. What is your definition of what it means to be a man?
Well, I suppose in terms of what I've known, to be a man is largely shaped by what I saw with my father. My father was in my mind, a man's man. He was one of these men from another generation who was born in 1919. And he was a man who had a third-grade education. His father left my father and his mother and 6 siblings. My father was a man who believed in doing what was right in terms of being a father, but he didn't have a role model. So when you ask the question, what does it mean to be a man? For me, it is so complex because I saw things in my father that I wanted to be like, strive to be like even today. And things about him that I really hated. I don't believe I've ever said that in public. But to be a man today means that I can say that, do it respectfully, and be candid and honest. So one of the things about being a man for me today is to be able to be courageous enough to say what is right, to say it at the right time, and to do it with an interest in the welfare of the person I'm speaking to. Put myself last is to be like that man. watched him do that. I'm not going to belabor the point, but my father was a man who was not interested in promoting himself. If anyone in this room knows him, they'll know that he was a man who was articulate. He was germane. He was a person who was erudite. He was a man's man, but he wasn't extravagant. He was a man who was crude in his beginnings, but God's grace brought him along. And one of the things that's important for me to share with you, my father was not a father by himself. We are interested in all of the testosterone in this room. But my father became a better father because he had a wife, my mother, who helped to show him how to be a man. I have a picture of my mother, Dr. Charlotte Rita Johnson McNaughton. My father's name was Kerry McNaughton, and I carry the name Kerry with great pride because although he was vulnerable, I learned to stand on my 2 feet because of what my father and my mother helped me to see about being a man.
Who wants to go next? It's hard to follow, man.
Well, I think he hit a point when he talked about my grandfather not having a role model. And so I guess that's been the biggest thing that I've learned. And I'm finally now hitting certain experiences where I'm now identifying like I'm an adult, I have responsibilities. But I think the biggest thing when I think about manhood is you have a sustaining effect. And to the point that it's of influence. So it doesn't really matter if you don't have children, if you don't have, the best finances and things like that. I think of a man as a person that is able to influence in a good way. And I've been somebody that's always been very observant. Of course, being the youngest, there's a 12-year gap between my brother and I. So things that I saw him do, I was like, oh, I want to do, or things that I saw my sister do, I wanted to do. And doing those things, I failed at some points, just trying to think like, oh yeah, I can do it, and I was too young, or having that mindset that I got my stuff together and everything. And it's funny because Kerry and I will get into arguments a lot of times when he's trying to direct me in some way. And I hate it. But at the same time, I know I'd probably do the same thing to his son, who there's a gap between us. I think it's 15 years or so like that. But that influence that Kerry and Catherine and others have upon me, Clifton is another guy, that's what I think about as manhood. It's not a thing of when I came to a certain age, but I could be a teenager and the influence that I had upon somebody else, that's something that's a sustaining effect for me. How much time we got, boss?
You got all day.
All right, I know y'all want to go eat your strippers and everything, but I'll keep it quick. Do things that stand out to me. Watching my father, protector, provider, and priest. Get it together. All right, so I'm just all over the place with my emotions because it's a privilege, and I'm grateful. And it's something to strive for when you have an example.
next question because I think there's a delineation between what the standard of a man should be and but this brings me to my next question. What is your definition of masculinity? And where did you learn what you determined masculinity to be? Anyone can answer that question.
Let me get this out of the way. I believe masculinity was very, very stereotypical of some of the things that you talked about in the opening. By the way, let me just say, friends, let me first recognize that in pursuit of today's program, there are so many excellent examples of fathers in this congregation.
Amen.
You would have done quite well to have chosen from any section in this room. So let me be able to say the truth. Remember I said that? I look at many of you and aspire to be more like you. Masculinity for me as I came up was not doing what you see us doing up here. Nobody who knew my father ever saw him cry. My father cried on 3 occasions. My mother told him when his mother died, I was standing there and a tear ran down his cheek. And he said, okay. My father cried when he married Weston and I, the young lady sitting back there next to, where are you, dear? You didn't leave the room, did you? Oh, okay, all right, good. He actually had a tear that ran down his cheek as we were repeating our vows. The audience didn't see it. The only other time my father cried, he broke down and sobbed like a little baby. And it was after he had become ill with the disease Alzheimer's. And he was in a nursing home. Lord help me. That's hard for me to say to you because I always thought my parents would never be in a place like that. I hope to be able to see them say and hear them say they forgive me for letting them be there. Be that as it may. I was visiting with him in the nursing home, sitting on the bed. He had all this tissue around him. And I walked in and I asked him how he was doing. He told me he had a cold. It's the only time I know of that my father didn't tell the truth. So McDonald, my father, was sitting there crying because he missed my mother. She was here and he was in Arkansas. It was unnerving to see this man cry. It's unnerving. Because one of the things about him, it always felt secure because he never, ever seemed afraid. I'm not like you. I get scared, and you know it. To be masculine for me was to be like my dad. He did not shed tears. And I knew then, when I saw that about him, I thought, man, is it the disease? No. My father loved my mother. He missed her. And there's more to that story, and I'll just leave it there. Fellas, what do you think?
Well, clearly, I'm not afraid to cry or just be myself. And that's directly because of my father. You know, it's rare that I see him physically cry. Everybody who knew me growing up, I was quick with the waterworks, whatever emotion I had, I'm gonna give it to you right then and right there. But I learned how my dad, he might not physically cry, but he cries in other ways. So once I picked up on that, it gave me more of a comfortable skin. Hey, always be yourself and be vulnerable. The one reason I was so tight about being in this setting, I'm not good in a public setting talking about real raw emotions and feelings. You catch me one-on-one, we could talk all day, a small group all day. But I said I'll do it because I grew up in this church. And if you haven't accepted me by now and all the craziness I've been through, I guess now would be the time to just be genuine and authentic all the time. I believe that's what it means to me.
This question is for Brother Norton specifically, and Carrie, you may be able to answer this question too, but was there ever a time you were disappointed in decisions your sons made, and how did you express that disappointment? And if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? See, you're just a bit too eager to answer that question.
I see that you only have about 3/4 of a battery on this mic, so I won't be too long. I think the context for answering this would be this. I disappointed my parents. When I was a very young person, I believed I was going to be a preacher. For those who don't know, my father was a pastor in this denomination for over 40 years. Okay? And all of my life, I wanted to be like my father. It was assumed that I was going to have the mantle passed to me. Pastor, I had presidents of conferences offer me a job when I was in high school. I don't say that with any vanity. It is clear to me that that's the trajectory that it seemed I was to take. I wanted a family at the same time. So as I was aspiring to be a minister in the gospel of Jesus Christ, I was also praying that one day I'd grow up, have a wife, and children. My experience in the Adventist ministry as a child dissuaded me from wanting to be a church pastor. I'm going to answer your question. And I wanted you to understand that I changed my mind about this because I couldn't see dragging my children around this world. It is a sacrifice, and so when I look at what you're doing, Pastor Calasar and your wife, Pastor Brooks and his wife, and look at what's happening with your children, I am amazed, I'm in admiration,
Yes.
and I pray for you a lot. When I told my parents I was not going to be a minister, here's where the Holy Spirit worked in my family. I was supposed to follow my father. He never told me he wanted me to be a minister. He and I knew it, that he wanted me to be a pastor. I never discussed it with my mother. She and I knew it, that she wanted me to be a pastor. When I told them I was changing my major, their hearts were broken. They never told me that. They never said to me they were disappointed. I just saw it. they couldn't help themselves. But here's how the Lord worked to save me. They did not reject me. I made a decision that disappointed them, but they continued to love me.
Yes.
So if they had managed that thing differently, I know, because I saw this happen with my peers, other young men who were the sons of pastors, who were the contemporaries of my parents, who were supposed to be pastors, who decided for some of the same reasons not to be. Some of those people were rejected by those men who were their fathers. My daddy never told me he loved me. I don't know what question you're going to ask me next, but I have to say this to you. I couldn't tell my father I loved him. He was not a man who wasn't my father. I didn't tell my father that I loved him until he was a man near death. I struggled one time on a Father's Day with a card I had from my dad, signed, a note I wrote, and at the end I had written that I loved him. And friends, I couldn't hand him the card. I loved him as much as any man could love another man. I left the card on the nightstand where he would see it, but I couldn't look at it. And that's just not the way he was. So I decided, by God's grace, my sons and my daughter were never going to fear touching me, being affectionate. So you see me kiss them. When they kiss me, I'm reinforcing the notion that my parents who loved me and God who loved me through them didn't reject me.
Yes.
They will always have a place. If I'm breathing, they will have a place in this world. They cannot disappoint me to the point of separation. They cannot break my heart to the point that I want to leave them alone. If God wouldn't leave me, in terms of disappointment, sure. But there's no disappointment that overwhelms and overshadows my love for them, not one iota.
If you could pick one area of fatherhood where you've fallen short and wish you could have done more, what would that be? And I want to ask that question in a way where you guys have actually observed your father in a way where you thought he could have done more, but didn't. If you could point that out. It's all right. I don't think spankings are legal in church.
My senior night of high school, Carrie had moved back from Huntsville the year before. So basically, Carrie and I, that was the first time. People that are like, I guess you could say new here, like Carrie and I hadn't been around each other probably since like 2001 at that time, for a consistent amount of time. And that was the first time Carrie and I were like, for me, it was like we were brothers. And so that year, he ended up actually becoming the assistant coach for my varsity team. And that was a cool thing. I remember the senior night. My parents couldn't be there first. I remember people said something to me. They were like, "Where's your parents?" Now, mind you, like, I had no problem with my parents not being there at first. They came later on at the game. But it dawned on me that, like, people hadn't seen my parents at my school. Like, a lot of the things that were going on. And before we ended up playing, and it was a big game, we were trying to get in the playoffs, and we weren't having that great of a season. But I remember that my other teammates, senior night, your family comes out, you know, they give you whatever little sacraments for you playing for the team or everything. And 2 guys on my team walked out with me. And my brother, who was the JV coach, was with the JV team at the time. So I didn't have any family that walked out with me. And somebody had said to me about, "Where's my parents?" And my parents were coming from work. And where I went to school was in Arlington. My dad worked in Dallas. And my mom doesn't drive because of her epilepsy and everything. And so what people kind of like try to turn it into a thing of was like my parents weren't supportive. Or my parents weren't there for me. But I saw my parents be there at times when I didn't expect for them to be there. And so what it did was those times when other people would expect for them to do something, I wasn't really worried. I wasn't really concerned because I knew at the end of the day, my parents were going to show up. Or I knew at the end of the day, even if I went home and I told them about the game, I wasn't going to have a feeling like my parents weren't there for me. I never really felt like my parents, and my dad especially, never did something enough. I've always felt like he did more than enough. If you know my dad, he buys more food than what we need. And he's always thinking about what you may need. If they send me money, it's like, oh, okay, I'll give you this. I got friends at school that are afraid to ask their parents for stuff. And I'm, you know, my family knows, like, I'll do whatever I need to do in order to get my money, to do whatever I have to. There's been times where I had to call my dad and say, look, I need this, and he sends more than enough. So the smallest things are symbols to me that it's not really about what my parents haven't done. I don't even know what they haven't done. I know what they have done, and that's been more than enough for me.
I'm looking at Kerry smiling, wondering if he has a different take on that.
You know, I'm the eldest in the little McNorton tribe here. So, as you listen to my dad speak, you could tell the impact his father had on him. So, being the firstborn, I want to say it's an experiment, but there's no book to tell you how to handle stuff. And I'm speaking as a father myself, you know. Growing up, after I grew up, after I, you know, look back on life, you know, there were times when I saw my dad, I didn't know it at the time, but my dad was trying to be vulnerable with me and have conversations with me. But I don't think he understood how to actually navigate through that. And so if I could go back in time, I would just have a more polished way, whatever that might look like, to just be vulnerable, to be open, to be able to disagree, you know, like agree to disagree. But looking back on it, I know he really tried. And so now when I look and I'm raising my son, I have these nuggets, I have these moments where I know, oh, this is that. This is what I need to do. Oh, this is that time for that conversation. All right, hey, little Carrie, just talk. Just talk, man. It ain't no ridicule, ain't no drama, ain't no judgment, just talk. So, I wouldn't say it was a disappointment, but it was a learning lesson looking back, now that I'm a father.
I don't know what you want to ask us next or how many questions you may have. CJ and I have had an interesting life together. You know, when CJ was born, I was, see how old was I, dear? I was 28, I think. So you have to understand this. I believe it takes a long time for most men to find common sense. I'm not sure.
This is not a moment to shout, so
I'm not sure.
slow down.
I'm not sure that when we find it, we recognize it and pick it up. In fact, I believe that probably the male of the species ought to be given a Social Security disability check. I believed when I married Weston that I had figured out what it was to be a man, and I knew basically what life had to offer, and I had all of the answers. I don't know why someone didn't just shoot me. When CJ was born, the day he was born, he arrived early. You know, he always does things on his schedule. He was 30 days early. I was standing in the delivery room. They extricated CJ from Weston's body. They clipped the cord, and they handed CJ to me. I picked him up, and I walked over to the other side of the room. Now, if you know anything about me back then, I had this big afro, I had a full beard, and I walked around as if it didn't matter what happened, I had it under control. I'm standing in the delivery room with my baby boy. He had already peed on everybody on the other side of the room. And I'm standing there looking at him, and all of a sudden, a chill, physically, a chill went through my body. Because this little fella was looking at his daddy, who was supposed to take care of him. And all of a sudden I realized I wasn't sure about me. So when you are struggling men, and the women you're associated with are having a hard time with you, why don't you think about the possibility that you're not as you appear? You're fragile, you're vulnerable, and if you don't recognize that and get the support you help with this thing, you will do some of the stupid things that you're currently doing going forward. And it doesn't have to be like that. So CJ has referenced the fact that I didn't know how to talk. I, in my behavioral health training, didn't know how to talk to my son. So part of the influence was my dad, who was very stoic and wanting things done precisely and immediately. It wasn't one who reflected on how he felt about himself or you. So son, you and I have talked about this, but in front of God and these people, thank you for forgiving me. Love you. Now let me tell you, this is how I know a father should be with his son.
Yes.
I want you to take a look. Take a look. Son, you can turn around, take a look. I've learned more about being a father watching this father. if you who are fathers could be like this father, your children will be saved. They will have a wonderful life. They will enjoy you.
Amen. I had a few more questions, but I decided, I think I'm going to end it right there, but sure.
Kev, Wes, I need you. Where's little Kevin? All of you come here quickly, please. I'm not going to delay too long. I just have to say something to you. I prayed for this family, and although I didn't deserve them, God gave them to me. I plan to see them through to the kingdom. It's important for you, City Temple, to recognize that I know, if it were not for the prayers and the financial support and the emotional support of many of you in this audience, these people I call my family would not be standing here. So very quickly and very succinctly, I am saying to you, City Temple, because CJ was 2 months old when he moved here with us, and Catherine was born here, and Wesley was born here, and little Carrie gets to visit here as often as he can. These people I call my family, and these children I call mine, are yours. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Amen. Wasn't that wonderful? These conversations are not necessarily just therapeutic to have, but what if your very soul was on the line? What if your path to heaven was on the line because you had so much stuff, so much crap bottled up that you never were able to let go? Is staying in your current condition worth eternal life? To keep up a facade? To pretend as if you have it all together? If the men perish, the church perish. So all I'm saying is, we got to get to the point where we're able to have these kinds of discussions on a day-to-day basis, not just today. This is just a springboard to begin some other things that we have planned, but if the difference between going to heaven and burning in hell was your choice to be more vulnerable, be more open, and sometimes you're not necessarily doing it just because you want to save yourself, but you want to save someone else. My prayer is just simple, that we don't just continue on a day-to-day basis the way that we've been going. It's not enough. Because you can go out and you can pass out tracts and you can preach a good word and you can do Bible study, you can do all these things, and you can bring people to Christ and save souls, and you could be lost. So, we have a separate segment that we're getting ready to do in a second, but I just hope that this helps someone. And I don't know who you are. I hope that it touched you in a way that it changes or it ignites something in you to be a bit more vulnerable. We're going to be doing a lot more things, and I hope that you will join me in this effort and continue these conversations, and I thank you for paying attention.
Let's praise God, these gentlemen, thank you. That was beautiful, right? Now, we did say that there's a second part to this interview, but because of the time, I'm going to call an audible, and I'm going to interview McDonald at another date. Is that okay? Because what I want for what us to do is to let this conversation soak in. Because I was beginning to feel something as I'm sitting there, watching them do that, is that there are a lot of you in here who did not have the privilege of a father like Elder McNorton. And to even have that courageous conversation. And so McDonald, I think, is on the flip side in the sense where he talked about his dad being an elder who was so busy, and I'm gonna make some assumptions, so busy at saving the church, he was kind of just thinking that the family came along as well. And so I'm going to call an audible, if that's okay, unless you want to stay a little bit longer. All right. I'm going to call an audible. We're going to do McDonald's courageous conversation. Okay? But I want to say this, though. I want to say this. That if we want to move, first of all, as men, we really need to start talking. And we really need to cry sometimes. And be okay with crying in front of each other. Number two, for those of you who have fathers who are absent, or fathers who were there but absent, in order for you to start living and being a better person, you have to forgive. Okay? Now this is the thing about forgiveness. You have to forgive people who don't deserve it. That's hard. You have to be able to get to a place where you can forgive somebody who does not deserve it. Because what does forgiveness do? Forgiveness sets a prisoner free until you discover that that prisoner is you. Because when you hold on to anger, it locks you up from being the best man that you can be for the people who depend on you. And always remember, you are not your parents. You are not your father. You are not your mother. You are not that person. You are somebody totally different, stamped with God's image, and you can make a difference. All right? So we're going to call the audible. And we're going to stretch this out. But men, I want you to encourage another brother to come out this evening to watch this documentary, The Mask You Live In. And men, I want you, if your fathers are alive, if your sons are alive, talk to them, please. We can't afford to have these angry young men who make decisions with their heart and not with their heads. Do you understand what that means? Because what's happening with all this violence is because we're reacting out of emotions. And so emotionally, because we're so angry, we want to shoot, we want to fight, but we're not thinking about what our actions are doing. And if fathers would just be there for their sons, and also, as I'm going to say this prayer, take the example of Joseph. Joseph was man enough to father a child that was not his. Jesus. Y'all know the story. Mary came home told me, I'm pregnant. Joseph like, who you knocking boots with? No, this baby is from heaven. Joseph, as we read in the Desire of Ages, he wanted to get rid of Mary. He's like, nah, that's an embarrassment to me. What kind of man you think I am? But Joseph was man enough to father a child that wasn't his.
Yes.
What I'm saying here today is that go back to the old African adage, the old African proverb. It takes a village to raise a child. So we got some young men in here that need us. Some young men outside that need us. Need to tell them how to dress. Need to tell them you better wear deodorant when you start getting fuzzy under there. Need to tell them how much cologne to wear, how much not to wear, and how to stand up properly and speak and look a man in his eye. Firm handshake. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Amen? All right, so let's thank God for the McNortons. Let's thank God for McDonald's, the awesome dad, someone who I look up to. Let's thank God for all the men and sisters.